This video, we're going to be talking about the quaternity of the socio-historic forces that are ultimately imposed upon the human artifact. So, what does it mean? Let's start with one big basic question. Like, what does it mean to exist and what does it mean to be? What is being, right? So when we think about being, there are a quaternity of socio-historic forces that no human being can ultimately escape. And these forces are historical, cultural, social, and spiritual in nature. And so when you come into being, right, we all have a mother, we all come into being. And when you do, these quaternity of socio-historic forces are ultimately imposed upon you as a person, and they shape your identity and how you understand yourself and ultimately how you interact with the world around you. Let me introduce to you the socio-historical forces. So I know it might be hard to see, my marker's kind of drawing out a little bit, so I'll walk you through it. So if this is a human being, right, you then have these four socio-historic forces that are ultimately imposed upon the human being. We'll start with the first one here. The first one is the cultural force. So the cultural force ultimately produces arts and education. The sort of elements of music, the sort of types of foods, those sort of aspects of culture ultimately shape an understanding of who you are as a person. Then down here at the bottom, you have these social forces, right? There's three different ones. So the first one is social constructionism, which we've discussed earlier about hermeticism, as within, so without, as above, so below, creating an understanding of how you are individuated as a person. You then have social interaction. This means that within a particular group of people, within a particular culture, how well do the people interact with one another, right? What do they work together to then produce, right? That's some of the questions that it then begins to ask. Social cohesion is how well do the people within this social group, the human beings in the collective, how well do they actually stick together? So, for example, in Africa, you may have an Igbo tribe, right, that kind of branches off. There might be more than one Igbo tribe, right? So that is a reflection of social cohesion, or as culture and art change over time, so does the social cohesion of a particular group of people. The third historical force, the third is the historical force. The historical force ultimately has the capacity to pin down the human being within a historical time period. So a lot of this has to do with the remembered experience of the collective, and also the collective memory of how they shape their understanding of themselves within that particular historical time period. So, as it pertains to Black Americans, the remembered experience of, the Civil Rights era and why that was important, and the collective memory of having figures like a Martin Luther King come out and create a space for people to then challenge some of those norms, right? The segregation and the Jim Crow era, and challenge some of those things within that historical time period. So that all shapes collective memory and remembered experience. And the final force is the spiritual force. So the spiritual force is really important because it's about individuation, both collective and personal. And it has a lot to do with your Orisha, with knowing your Godhead. The spiritual force is also important because it determines how well a collective of people are growing, how well they are ultimately individuating over time. Because what we understand to be true is that consciousness, which is shaped by your archetype and your mythology, consciousness is designed to grow over time. Aflorar porque florecer. So when you begin to examine some of those archetypes that emerge within a collective of people within a historical time period, you then can begin to determine how well is this group of people individuating over time. So the idea is simple, that this ultimately helps to garner a greater appreciation for your own individual culture as well as the cultures of other people and how they ultimately choose to live their lives as people.